Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
I'm so appreciative for you this time and any time that you take a few minutes of your day to join me, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. I have watched over the last several weeks as we move towards the end of year, but this would apply to any time frame where gift officers are looking at what they need to do to finish out the calendar year, which brings us to how do we make this easier on ourselves? And are we doing all of the little things that could make it more obtainable to reach our goals? And this brings us to the importance of referrals. All too often, we have become more isolated, more dependent on just ourselves when it comes to bringing gifts to fruition. And what I'm realizing is that we're not leveraging the importance of including others into the conversation, in particular at the front end, and getting people to be engaged and have philanthropic conversations about possibilities. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about boards. I'm talking about clinicians and faculty. I'm talking about data. What are the things that we're doing to get us in front of the right people, to have the right conversations, to elevate the philanthropic conversation? Where would we start with this discussion? Well, we should start with why it's important. Is there data out there to verify that what we're looking to do, to have these referrals, has value? And I'm not talking about anecdotal data. I'm talking about statistical data, studies, things that can be proven. And here we don't talk about these kind of stats enough, because the answer is, in our world that we're talking about today, how do we leverage others outside of maybe, each other inside a foundation office to be a part of what we're trying to accomplish for success? Let's start with boards. So a study done by the Stanford Effective Philanthropy Lab found that 40% of major donors who were introduced through the opportunity or organizational effort through a personal connection, like a board member or volunteer, that their giving increased, as mentioned, by that 40%. Fidelity Charitable Study revealed that 71% of major donors are more likely to engage with a nonprofit if they're introduced by some kind of trusted advisor. BoardSource has done some research to find out that 78% of an organization who does major gifts in excess of $1 million attribute their success to this idea of board referrals. The Lilly School of Philanthropy, in terms of peer-to-peer solicitations, in a study that they looked at, found that their gift closure rate increases by 25% when the referral comes from a volunteer board member. CCS did a study that found out that when you prioritize your board and volunteer referrals, on average, the average gift goes up 15%. And data from an organization I believe in, and I'm a member of, the Giving Institute, finds that when we include a strong referral process, 20 to 30% increase in our major gift success rates. That's staggering from a board perspective. Are we leveraging the right people? Do we have the right people? Are we getting the right kind of referrals? We'll talk about that here in a moment on the tactical. What about clinicians, faculty, internal people? And there are obviously incredibly challenging things, and we'll talk about this more in a moment, about how to engage with them at a level that makes them feel comfortable, because they don't come to this naturally, which is fine. But a University of Wisconsin foundation, when you have a great or robust clinical or faculty referral program process, report that in grateful patient programs, when a physician makes the referral, it increases the gifts, major gifts total, by 26% year over year. So we're talking about how do we leverage those opening conversations, in particular in this case with grateful patients. The same is true of faculty. When we find that we have a university or others that are part of this process. There's also what I would consider the non-human elements of this, because really this is about pipeline development. And FreeWill did a study that organizations that employ a robust prospect management process, embrace the latest technology to do so, are 23% more likely to close and secure the major gifts they need. And they're really also talking about in this study, heightening those major gifts to what we talk about all the time on this podcast, transformational levels, not a dollar figure, where we get the emotional core of the donor wanting to make a difference. All this is to say that we need referrals to be really, really successful. Why am I doing this podcast? Because what I'm finding is that we are taking shortcuts in the process to make it easy for us to partner with people instead of really fighting for the people that we really want, or that maybe more importantly, we really need. That more work on the front side to have the right board doing the right things, the right clinical faculty, organizational partners. If we spend a little more time on the front side, if we use the right data and believed in it, that more work in the beginning will leverage greater success down the road. And we don't do this very well. I sometimes think that the choices that we make for board members, and it's really more their choice about themselves than us as staff, but the principle is we drive a lot of that. The decisions we make about what clinicians we're working with. All of these things lead us to conversations around, do we have the right people? And they tend to just be afterthoughts. Well, we need 12 members on the board, so let's go find somebody. Let's get our best friend. Let's get the clinicians we know the best. Let me give you some practical examples. Recently have a client who is going through the initial stages of really identifying their best clinician partners for a healthcare organization looking for a grateful patient program and referrals from that. What they did is they brought a list of their doctors that they believed that they would have the best opportunities with. And in doing so, we had done the data analysis on the backside to kind of think about what clinicians would have the best opportunities when it came to the kinds of patients they were seeing and were they aligned clinically with the needs. Because we know in grateful patient work, 80-90% of the grateful patients generally want to give to where they're connected, the people that made the difference. Well, their list, the foundation's office list, had nobody on it that was on the data list. And when we put that data list in front of them, they began to look at it going, well, we don't know these doctors. And that's when I hope what I do works. Work at it awfully hard. But I started positing this theory. If these data-wise show that they have the most amount of patients with the best opportunity for major gifts and they align with what the needs of the hospital are, wouldn't we be better off trying to figure out a way to work with those physicians rather than the ones you can just send an email to when they show up? Doesn't mean we discard those other ones, but are we really trying to get to the best people, which may be more work on the front side, or are we just kind of doing the exercises because somebody says we have to? Another example, I have another client that we're going through some board conversations, and along the same lines as the different client with the physicians, nurses, PAs, NPs, mid-levels, whomever. We had that same conversation about the board. Do you represent your community? And I posited the same argument. Would it be better to spend a little more time on the front side to get the right people to help you on the back side? May mean more work to begin with, but at the end of the day, will it produce more results? From a personal perspective, in the mid part of my career, I took a job as the head of external relations at a school that I didn't know, in a community I'd never lived, and really loved the place. It was a great 5 years. But I realized very quickly that this community was incredibly insulated. And I don't mean it in a negative way. These were incredibly outgoing people who were changing the world. But in terms of trust and connection, man, you had to be one of them to really have access to them at the level you needed. And there was a guy who was a graduate who knew everybody because he had taught at the school. He had coached at the school. He was beloved. And he really wasn't as connected in his retirement as he should be. And I pushed into him hard and said, I want you to come on staff. And it was really paid volunteer work. I don't have another way to put it. His only job in his middle 60s was because he had coached almost all the people that I needed to be speaking with. He had gone to school with the other people that I needed to be speaking with. He was known by the people before he went to school, before he became a student in this institution in the mid part of the 1950s. The people in the graduates in the 30s and 40s who were obviously much older knew of him. I said, come on board. I'm going to pay you $2,500 a month. All I want you to do is get me in the door with these people. You're going to travel with me. We're going to do this together. But your entire job is, if we'll sit down and look at where we're going, and I need you to get me access. Think about the referrals that came from that. Because when he picked up the phone and talked to a classmate or someone he coached, he's a legendary figure who literally could pick up the phone and say, I'm coming there and I'm going to bring someone. I want you to meet him. The conversion rate of us getting in front of people went up exponentially. I mean, it's hard to explain what our trips were like to California and Arizona, to Florida, to Texas, to Chicago, to New York, because we'd be there 4 days. We'd have 5 appointments per day, all because he could pick up the phone or send an email and say, hey, I'm coming and I want you to meet somebody. And they would drop what they were doing. That's a referral agency. What are the challenges with doing it this way, making it more difficult, really looking for the right people and not settling on others? Well, number one, it takes longer. There's no question. It just takes longer to do. Number two is that you have to actually ask for help. It's hard sometimes to admit that we can't do everything ourselves. We're hired, particularly if you're a leader in a nonprofit listening to this, or a board member, maybe you want to push in a little bit and have the conversation. It's hard for leaders in any organization or any part of our economic world to admit, I need help. There's a sense of not entitlement, but you're supposed to know everything. Man, this is about the essence of laying bare, laying on the ground. Look, I need help here. We need help. Sometimes hard to do. Number three is you have to trust someone. Are they going to be willing to help you in the way you need to? Can you build the right relationship to help you with those referrals? And number four, we have to be willing to do this differently. We have to look at what we do and be willing to admit the way we've always done it isn't the right way of looking at it and doing it in the future. When you add those four things together, it takes longer. You have to ask for help. You have to trust, and you have to do it differently. This creates a lot of natural resistance to doing things in a better way. So what is it that we're really talking about? This is the formal tactical piece of this particular conversation. There are 3 things we have to think about, and they're really by the 3 areas. So let's start with boards. We have to get the right board members. So in podcast, this episode, Around with Randall, 197, I really get into this in detail, the timeline and how you identify the right board members. Not the easy ones, but the right ones. And all of this comes down to two things, which you can hear in detail. Number one is the social networking mapping of your community, however you define that. Do you have tentacles, the right board members, in all of the different social gathering places your community represents? And number two, do they clearly understand what you're asking them to do? This is not just, hey, come to a board meeting and sit for an hour and have lunch, mission moment, and leave. This is, we want you to carry a portfolio. We're going to track what data you have in terms of who you're connecting us to. We're going to create a metric system that we're looking for 2, 4, 6 people per year that you can introduce us to. Doesn't mean they're going to make a gift. But if you have the right social networking, you're into the parts of the community. And number two, you have the right job description and you're tracking that data, you're very open as to what this is. That's how you get the right board members. Then I would recommend, as a kind of a conclusion on the board or volunteer side, and you can include campaign management into all of this, is episode for Around with Randall number 13, where we talk about how do you do proper orientation? How do you prepare them for that first meeting when they walk in the room? So boards is the first tactical piece. The second are clinicians. And this is more complicated. Now, many people will focus just on healthcare. I'd advocate this includes faculty and other frontline great employees in your nonprofit, no matter what sector you're in. Are you doing this? And the tactical piece for this group is, are you doing this with the people you know, or are you doing it with two other factors? Number one, are they the right connections? Do they have access to the people in your community that can make the biggest philanthropic difference? Which means you need to do, we'll get to this in a moment, some analysis. This goes back to the story I was talking about a few minutes ago around a client who was like, well, we'll work with these physicians, and we showed them the data, like, we don't know any of these people. Who's going to be better in the long term? Number two is alignment. Many times, so if we are in education, if I have a particular faculty member that reaches out to me when I was, let's say, in law school, now there's 1 or 2 left teaching, but they're retired possibly. And they say, Randall, we want you. Well, I'm going to give to the law school. If you're trying to get me to give to the med school, that's not going to work. So they have to be connected and aligned. In healthcare, as we talked about a few minutes ago, we know 80 to 90% of our grateful patients and families give to the area of their care. So if you're working with a cardiologist, do they have cardiology needs that the organization is prepared for? That there's a plan that they can spend the money on? This alignment issue is sometimes overlooked. So this is a high level discussion inside this particular podcast. But if you want more detail about, in particular, doctors and nurses and care techs and NPs, mid-levels, PAs, that's episode 140 about the trust with clinicians, how you build that. And then the other thing is with clinicians, how do you communicate with them? That's episode 69. So there's a lot more detail inside those particular podcasts. The third area that we have to think of, and this is the third tactical piece, is data. We have to trust data from prospect management and the people that are trying to help identify the right people for us to talk to embracing artificial intelligence. The longer I do this, the more I'm impressed by what I get out of using artificial or having clients use artificial intelligence. If you want a greater detail understanding of AI at non-Nathan Chappelle levels, which is kind of the leader in this space, you can go to my episode number 5 on AI as kind of a high level overview. But we're watching many gift officers almost be repulsed by the fact that AI is guiding them to certain people. Well, I know what people to see. This is no different than the referral pieces from the board and from the clinicians. Do we have the right people? This is all about pipeline development. And so if we're not using data and data analysis and AI to its highest level, we're leaving opportunity on the table. And that's a change. That's hard. So the tactical piece is, are you using your social networking through your board, through your community with your boards? Are you using your internal players, clinicians, faculty, frontline nonprofit workers who have connections to people that might be interested in supporting the organization? And are you using data to its highest level? I titled this particular podcast, The Easy or the Correct Referral Patterns, Actions. And the reason I did that is all about what we started with. Are we doing what's easy in the front side so it's more difficult on the back? Or would we be better doing what's more difficult on the front to leverage huge and just wonderful moments on the backside of what we do, which is the relationship building, which is eventually soft asking and soliciting someone who wants to make a difference that fits with their passion, with what they're trying to do, and it meets up with our mission. I'd highly advocate that we spend more time concentrating, working through, and really diving into how we can be more effective with the people that give us the referrals than have to dig and make transactional decisions on the backside when we don't have the right people to be working with. Don't forget, check out the blogs at hallettphilanthropy.com. 2 a week, 3 a week, just things I see, read, experience, maybe something for you to think about. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, it's podcast at hallettphilanthropy.com. I believe so heartily, and I could do a lot of different things. I mean, I go practice law, I could go teach. I think of what I do here is teaching, but I can do a lot of different things. I want to do what I'm doing. I love the nonprofit world. I love the way that it fills the gaps between kind of corporate and government. It's kind of that hole where people are missed, issues are missed. And what you do every day is you're helping to fill that gap, whatever that is, in your community. Don't forget, some people make things happen. Some people watch things happen. Then there are those who wondered what happened. You're someone who makes things happen. And you're doing it for the people and the places that are wondering what happened. There could be no better way to spend a career, to make a difference, to change lives. At the end of the day, I hope you can look in the mirror and say, I know that I'm a part of that process and I'm making a contribution. Because I may not know you, but I know that you are if you show up and do your very best every day. We'll look forward to seeing you the next time right back here on the next edition of Around with Randall. And don't forget, make it a great day.